Hello everybody, my name is Ricardo Moreira Borges. I'm the head of the Biodiversity Analysis and Evaluation Laboratory in the Baltimore's Institute of Research on Natural Products at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. So in our laboratory, our goals revolve around the development of methods for compound identification within metabolomics and natural product research. For that, we focus on in approaches such as dereplication, metabolomics, database access, isolation and purification, and cheminformatics for studies using different sources. Our main tools are mass spec, NMR, and bioassays, this last one with collaborators, for the final goal of understanding ecosystems and drug discovery. Today I'm gonna talk about database independent dereplication. I'm calling it part 2 in the title because the first part of it was the theme for my last talk at the BR Mass in December last year, 2018 in Rio, about the mass spec side of it. Today I'll be focused on the NMR side of the method I'm presenting. So this is the overall scheme that represents our effort to integrate mass spec and NMR techniques to reach high confidence compound identification in one automated software. Okay. The goal is to generate a list of most probable occurring compounds within a mixture. From this view, we have mainly a mass spec side and an NMR side for experimental data acquisition, and one mid step to populate candidate list that uses biosynthetic inferences for possible co-occurrence and similarity search from structured database. The candidate list will then be the filtered database for the NMR compound identification, generating then accuracy or confidence in the results. So let's start it. On the NMR side of it, little was really developed. From my part of it, the use of Lipid Explorer with the custom-made molecular fragmentation query language, the MFQL files with molecular formula restrictions for both MS1 and MS2 was shown last year in the BRMAS meeting. And it's published in 2 papers at the phytochemical analysis. Aside from this part, the MS side of this approach focus on a putative identification using enzyme mining or MS-DIO preprocessing routines and molecular networking the replication with GNPS. The Lipid Explorer thus will be used to aid in node annotation. The goal here is to index candidate compounds as any mass spec based dereplication method would be engaged. Once the first list of candidates is achieved, it will be extended through a search for similar compounds and furthermore for related compounds for the from the non-biosynthetic pathways. This part is rather manual still, but we are working on automation for that. In this mid-step, we plan to make it possible for users to add a candidate list compiled through alternative means, such as chemotaxonomic, for example. Then from that extended candidate list, their NMR data is predicted using NMR shift database method, and both HMBC and HSQC toxic correlations are anticipated. Note that this is a key step for all the approach. The accuracy of the predicted method depends heavily on the database. So the whole approach will become increasingly better with the increasing amount of compounds submitted to the database used. And And this is why this method is not really database independent, but it's providing a good enough tool for non-cataloged compounds. This is one tricky part. Our approach requires a fine peak picking to map the correlation in a HSQC and HMBC and HSQC tox spectra in order to define a correlation network among them. Note that we are using only scalar coupling constant to fish chemical shift values interconnected by 1, 2, or 3 covalent bonds. My suggestion is always use high resolution for the C13 axis, at least 1K points. Then these correlated chemical shift values will be reorganized as a community, and ideally a single compound will produce a single community if all chemical shift correlates among themselves by homonuclear and heteronuclear constant, coupling constant through 1, 2, or 3 bonds away. By organizing the community and matching them with those created by the NMR prediction step, we generate a list of most probable compounds found in the mixture. We designated two quality parameters for ranking that list. The distance defines the similarity of the predicted spectra to the measured spectra, and it's taken as one indication of most likely compound for these compounds, candidates for its compounds. The other indication is the standard deviation, which tells us something about how connected those matched peaks really are among themselves. At the end, we added a visual validation step for users to be able to judge how correct is the identification. So this is it. We are constantly doing modifications to make it better and more flexible for users. This is under construction, and we'll be developing more versions. We'll be releasing more versions in the future. So let's go for some examples now. Well, for a first and simple example, let's try vanillin and D2O. All the examples here were done using only HSQC and HMBC data. We can add HSQC toxi, but it will only be present on the next version of the software. So I got these HSQC and HMBC from BMRB and submitted a big list in our pipeline. Note that no peak matches perfectly with the experimental. The distance was found to be 0.18. In other words, not quite good enough. But we add the HMBC to identify correlated peaks with standard deviation of 0.67. That's not very bad. Maybe the best way to put it is that we don't intend to fully automate the identification of compounds in mixture, but rather to enable users to better visualize their data and to come up with a high confidence level identification list for their mixtures. Note that we now have matched peaks in both HSQC and HMBC, and the profile looks good. This is another case for the identification of core setting. Yeah, the profile looks good. We have several matching peaks for both HSQC and HMBC. So to make it more interesting, we got some different compounds, or actually different data, from the BMRB and created an artificial mixture. This is the reconstructed raw spectra from the peak data for this artificial mixture. So we ran everything into our pipeline, and let's analyze the visual validation part. The best example here is the identification of beta carotene within that mixture. We have several peaks being matched on both HSQC and HMBC, so the prediction was very good, the correlation was very good, and this is actually a perfect case. Another good example from the artificial mixture is the identification of 4-isopropylbenzyl alcohol. Since our method predicts the HMBC data through 2 or 3 bonds, we might overfit a little bit the expected correlations. But this is why we have this visual validation step, so users can give the final decision. But again, the identification, I would say it's clear. Now I added into this candidate list the 4-hydroxyphenylacetaldehyde to probe a negative result. Note that the aldehyde proton predict is way off. The predicted value is good enough for an aldehyde proton, but we don't have the signal in that region for the artificial mixture. So this is a no-go for this candidate. Compound from the mixture, killing. Note that the chemical sheets are not perfectly matching, but the overall profile is evident. We have a huge shift from the expected to the found. And that is also true for the flavone. Flavone is actually better than killing. We'll get into it in the next part. And finally, the identification of kinidine. So we can see that we have several peaks that were not very nicely predicted, and that can lead to error. And that's why we are doing not only the HSQC but the HMBC as well. And at the HMBC we can see some good matching. But anyway, the key feature to be noted is the possibility for visual validation. In this final version, we intend to make it more interactive, but it's amazing how we can simplify our view of the messy HSQC and HMBC spectra for mixture. Now let's go for a full application. In here we use it as a test sample the alkaloid fraction of Pilmus boldus. The LC-MS data was collected, processed accordingly, and submitted to molecular networking for MS-based compound identification routine. From these, we created a preliminary list of candidates by propagating the structural elucidation from the previous identified nodes using the GNPS database. And then we extended that first list of candidates by adding other compounds from the same non-biosynthetic pathways. In parallel, we collected the NMR data, HSQC and HMBC. We'll leave the HSQC toxicity section for another opportunity. Note the complexity of both spectra with lots of cross peaks. One could try to manually identify compounds from it. I used to do that with my students, but it was a nightmare really. But now using our method, we can better organize everything into a set of most probable compound in the mixture. Then we start to evaluate each figure with the separated plots for final decision. As the first component and the most probable to be present, we have norbodine. This would be bodine without the N-methyl group. We have some identified peaks for both HMBC and HSQC, which shows a good agreement with the literature. Next, bodine, the taxonomic biomarker of Bodo. Again, we have some nice peak matching for both HMBC and HSQC. Some of the peaks for the HSQC might be off, and this might be due not only for the prediction step, but also for the sample conditions such as temperature or pH or even solvent. As an interesting case now, this structure wasn't identified, but we only suggested through node propagation in the network. We produced this benzyl isoquinolate alkaloid derivatives proposal. I'd say the identification is quite clear, but of course, in this case, in cases like this, we would need to have it purified for a deeper analysis for an equivocal identification. But then again, this is the whole point of doing the application, to focus on the new results and not to replicate the old ones. This one would be a non-derivative of cochlorine, and cochlorine as expected. And now remember that we extended that first list of candidates using biosynthetic pathway. Here we have the identification of dopamine as it is expected, since it's a precursor of all these alkaloids I've been showing here. Remember that we are only confirming the identification previously done using the mass spec routine, which is way more sensitive, and increasing the confidence for that identification. Mainly our goal is to overcome the intrinsic limitation of mass spec to assert position of certain substituents. In this other example, we got this alkaloid-rich fraction from Brugmans suaveolens and try to identify tropane alkaloids. For this case, we only got the NMR data. There we have HSQC, HSQC toxin, HMBC, quite rich spectra for each. And before all this, I would align the spectra and start painfully connected all the cross peaks on the C13 axis. Once I get the full correlation network closed, I would go manually through several papers to find matching values for the chemical shifts. It's take just too much time to be routinely done. But now with our method, and in this case using only a chemotaxonomic driven list of candidates, we could simplify our identification by selected spectral visualization. We have a nice identification for scopolamine and another nice identification of atropine. Pseudotropin and tropinone, and the callistogenes A3 and B2. Again, I will only show some of the candidate's identification. I hope the idea is now clear. I would like to mention that this is and it will be 100% open access. As you already noticed, it's not fully database independent, so please submit your spectral data once you have the approval from the peer review process. I would suggest GNPS's massive database for mass spec data and NMR Shift DB2 for NMR data. Also, we need to call attention to people to always acquire those 3 NMR experiments for their samples, fraction or extracts. We are collaborating with Dr. Eric Cups from Brooker to design a NOAA supersequence to include specifically HSQC, HSQC toxic, and HMBC spectra with only one recovered delay in order to make it faster, easier, and standardize it to assure reproducibility. We are constantly making developments, and it will hopefully be founded by next year. And the improvements will include a GUI application using deep learning to aid the performance, peak picking, correlation findings, and so on. And the spectral data for comparison, the one we predicted, will be made more flexible for people to be able to use, for example, quantum mechanical based simulations for the chemical shifts and G values. We are actually developing the idea of creating an online fully automated procedure for such QM simulations of chemical shifts and coupling constants as a spin-off of this project. This would be a good fit. Finally, the flexibility of the candidate list enable us to foresee the use of this method for different kind of research, including chemotaxonomic based research, genome mining, metabolism products, and even for predicted reaction products. Let's go now for the NMR data submission for the NMR Shift DB2. In these next slides, I intend to show the information users will be required to have for their submissions. Note that to have those informations previously organized together with the numbered structure and the list of assigned proton and carbon will make the whole process fairly easier. To begin with, users are required to draw the structure, and note that it accepts SMILE strings to be pasted into the Marvin JS area. Next, once the structure is accepted, users must choose the nuclei for which the NMR data will be submitted. Note that at the end of the submission, users can choose to submit another spectra or another data for the same structure. Then the chemical sheet will be submitted as a column. And of most important, the numbering should always be checked and reassigned if necessary. For most cases, the biosynthesis derived numbering system does not match the atom number yielded by Marvin JS. So be aware of this step. Correct assignments is very important for future work. Next, for the metadata, the information regarding the publications of the data that users are submitting. For these, peer-reviewed papers are favorite to be submitted, to be used. And additional but not less important information such as temperature, solvent, and frequency of the instrumentation used. So how necessary is this data submission for our method? Since the method relies on a step that uses the database for chemical shift predictions, the accuracy of those predictions will be better if similar compounds are cataloged in the database. Of course, shifts derived from matrix effect might lead to imperfections in the peak matching, but the overall profile recognition uh, is improved. Okay, so we have this example here, and we have some better peak predictions. In another example, there will be cases where the matching is not perfect, as I mentioned. This might be due to shifts uh, effect by the matrix. Okay, remember that we never submitted to the database any NMR data from compounds within mixtures, but only pure compounds. And when they are in mixture, the other compounds, the other constituents of that mixture might affect the the physical chemical parameters for that very compound that we are analyzing. In another case, the idea here is to prove that NMR data shall be better used once it's submitted. In this case, for the NMR shift DB2, of course. We should note that to maintain an in-house database listed in tables is way less effective for fast compound identification routines. To automate this is to give a step further for development. So with this, I close this presentation, and I acknowledge people who have been helping me, my people from Brazil and others, and especially Stefan Kahn, who is the cheminformatician who is helping writing all this stuff.